Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Rizzoli Bookstore, and thank you all for being here tonight with Rizzoli and Chelsea Green to celebrate the publication of How to Save the Amazon, A Journalist's Fatal Quest for Answers by Dom Phillips. We are honored to be joined by Alessandra Sampaio, who is Dom's widow. She's also the founder of the Dom Phillips Institute, founded to promote and share knowledge of the Amazon and its people. She is joined on stage by Andrew Fishman. He's a contributor to How to Save the Amazon, a friend of Dom's, and the president and co-founder of The Intercept in Brazil. And our moderator is Matthew Hay Brown, America's editor for The Washington Post, which is a publication that Dom also used to write for previously. And a special thank you to the Overseas Press Club, who is our partner this evening in hosting this and who connected us to Matthew and was able to help us. And they're live streaming this event as well for people who aren't able to be here. The Overseas Press Club is the nation's oldest and largest association of journalists engaged in international press, and they work diligently to advance press freedom around the world. It has been such an honor to be able to steward this project here in the United States, and so we also have to thank Ale for trusting us with something that I know is so special to you. And I had heard that at the Hay Festival you had said, this is not just a book, but it's also a movement. And I think we're all reminded that movements like this are happening all over the world. People who are putting their lives at risk to protect our lands, to protect our waters, to protect our rights and our freedoms. And we don't always hear the stories about all of them, but they are fighting in the Amazon. They are in places like Standing Rock in Gaza, in Los Angeles, in our universities. And so, my hope, I think, with this project has been that Dom's work is going to inspire, all of us to support all of these movements and all of these people when they're alive as well, so that, and they can use the support, and I hope that, we will all be able to share just a tiny bit of the courage that Dom has shown to all of us. And I heard a quote from Rebecca Solnit the other night that I'm copying the person who shared it, but I think it's very applicable. She said, the fact that we cannot save everything does not mean that we cannot save anything. And everything that we can save is worth saving. And so on that note, I'd like to introduce our moderator, Matthew. They're going to speak for about 40 minutes, and then there will be a chance for everyone to ask some questions and have some books signed as well afterwards. So thank you. And
great. Thank you, Alex. Thank you, Andrew, and thank you especially, Ale, for not just being here, but for sharing Dom and his work with us and with the world. I wanted to start by asking you about Dom and the Amazon. It's clear from not just this book, but from his news reporting over the years that he cherished the rainforest. What was it that drew him? What attracted him?
Hello, everybody. First of all, English is not my mother tongue, so excuse some different expressions, but I can be very inventive to create new words. And I have my friend with me, my menopause friend. So sometimes I forgot the words, and I have my friend here that can translate and help me to not be ashamed here. to talk about this project, I really have to talk a little about Dom. Dom was a guy, amazing, lovely, handsome guy, and he is very connected with nature. And I think this is quite important to say, because he saw the nature not something apart him. Nature is part of him, him understanding his life and everything. And another thing is, when Dom joined in the beginning to talk about Amazon, to work writing about Amazon, he was the kind of journalist that care about not just about the information, but about people and about their stories. So he involved himself in the issues and the problems and in the people's life. So I think that naturally Don was creating this network in Amazon, and he has this presence to hear people without judgment. So he could talk to indigenous people and activists and scientists, but also with farmers, with gold miners, because he has this attitude to listen everyone. And for this reason, I think that he felt responsible to share with everyone his experience in Amazon, very rich experience. And Amazon actually became a huge responsibility for him. And every time he came back, returned from his trips to Amazon, he said to me, Ale, I really believe that if people know better, more about Amazon, all the beauties and all the potential of the rainforest and its people normally would commit it to protect it. So I have to share my experience with people.
So it sounds as if when he was thinking of it, he was not simply thinking of the vegetation or the animal life, but the communities that were there.
Absolutely.
Great.
Very attached with people.
Great. There has been, over the years, a great deal of concern, a great deal of discussion, a fair amount of ink spilled about what the Amazon needs, how to save the Amazon. What was Dom's idea? How was this book going to be different from what already had been written?
Well, for me, and you can talk again. For me, this discussion is not just outside of Amazon. We have to listen people from Amazon. We have to listen people that work to protect the Amazon, and they are in the center of the discussion. That's the point. I think this is different, because we have solutions created out of Amazon by governments, by I don't know, many discussions, but people. I think that people that take decisions not listen, not hear people from Amazon, and it's absolutely essential.
The people who have lived there for generations.
For generation,
or for centuries.
in harmony with rainforest,
In harmony.
protecting the lands, making, how can I say, manejo.
Managing sustainable.
Yeah, absolutely.
Would you like to add to that? What makes this work different?
So Dom, you said he was always very connected with nature, even since he was a kid going camping out with his family, but he came to the Amazon and just had this intense emotional connection to it. I mean, he just went there and it's like, wow, this place is like nothing I've ever seen before. And think so much of the reason why he decided to dedicate his career to this, make this pivot. I mean, he was working for an oil magazine as a freelancer, and he went from that to becoming environmental journalist because it was so powerful. And he decided to, stop his main job as a freelance reporter, do this book project. Was not making a lot of money to do this. It's because he really cared, and was investing his own money to do these trips, to go, to make it so that he could show the thing that made him have this emotional connection, that make him care so much, right? Because people only protect the things that they care about. And so if he could get the rest of the world, because it's not just the people that are in the Amazon that have the power to decide what its future is going to be, very much the opposite, in fact. I mean, the people who are outside, our 401ks and pensions and these massive banks that are making a fraction of a percent of their profits coming from devastation of communities and ecosystems. If you could get them, you all, thank you for coming, by the way, to care just a little bit as much as he did, then hopefully this could be the beginning of, or not the beginning, I mean, this has already been ongoing, but he could contribute to the growth of this increasing movement and pressure, because we know that these major organizations, these politicians, they are not doing what they are supposed to do. They're living in a parallel reality and pretending like the things that are happening aren't actually happening. And so that's only going to change when there's enough of us out here that are making that impossible for them, that are changing the bottom line economics of these decisions so that it's no longer profitable for JBS, the biggest meat company in the world and also the biggest in the United States right now, to just break every environmental commitment they've ever had, or for major investment banks to say, like, yeah, we're going to increase our bottom line by 0.01%, without any regard for the people there, the ecosystem, our global climate implications, our reputations, and just our baseline humanity. So I mean, the title is incredibly bold and intimidating. It was intimidating for him, I know, but the point was not to sit down and answer all the questions, but to invite as many people as possible to ask this question with him and to care about what the answers are so that we could all start taking at least another step forward.
Thanks. I want to get into the contents of the book and what you all found and what Dom found. But before we do, he talked about, and he writes about, not only how to save the Amazon, but why to save the Amazon. What, in Dom's view, what in your views, would be the reasons to save the Amazon?
I think, first of all, we are facing a climate crisis. Boy, that's it. What's so nonsense? Just ignore what is this challenging time that we are living and destroy the remaining rainforest or the forests around the world. For me, it's absolutely crazy. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? And another point, I think that we are destroying one amazing and immense biodiversity before even get to know it. So now we are discovering the ecosystem service that, for example, Amazon produce as a climate regulation, something like producing rains, maintaining the humidity, absorbing carbon. So, and much more things that we have no idea until today. And I think that we don't know the technology of nature, because there is a lot of things, a lot of possibilities in the rainforest, biomedicine, new, how can I say this? New food that we can discover, because maybe we can face some problems with the production of food. So, for me, it's a kind of no sense. Don't know about it.
Okay.
You know.
Did you want to add?
I mean, there's a lot of reasons, but just go from the most basic, closest to you. It's completely egotistical. I mean, if the Amazon is at the very edge of a tipping point. This is a scientific consensus. We don't know exactly when it's going to be, what it will look like, but there's a point of no return where you've deforested enough of the Amazon so that it can't create the water cycle, so it can't replenish itself, and then suddenly it just goes into this tipping point where it transitions from this incredible, beautiful rainforest that's providing all of the water for South America to a savanna and maybe even to a desert. If that happens, São Paulo, the biggest city in South America, already has trouble with its own water supply. You can imagine what would happen if the source of that water disappears. Imagine what will happen to all of the crops that the reason that this is being chopped down for cattle and for crops. It's going to be very hard to plant them. That a lot of that goes to feed much of the world. But just think geopolitically, what would happen if the entire continent, its main source of water, disappears? How many, the immigration crisis that's happening in the US right now, or at least the political focus on it, how many hundreds of millions of people are going to be trying to flee South America? And when they do, we know that the Amazon is not isolated by itself. So there's many other global climate tipping points that are happening around the world right now. The Atlantic Meridian overturning current, which could also be at a tipping point very close. If the Amazon tips, then those are all going to tip much faster and much harder. So I don't know if any of you have kids or plan to or grandkids, but that's not a very positive outcome. So, I mean, there's lots of reasons, you can go to the Amazon like Dom did and meet these incredible people, and you'll read about them in the book, and you'll want to do it for them. But you can just do it for yourself. I mean, for all of us, for humanity. It seems so basic and obvious and so important. And when you look at the profits that are being made for the destruction, 80 to 90% of the deforestation coming from cattle, the profits are so minuscule. They're so small, like per hectare, per acre, per year. They're making just these insignificant sums of money in the grand scheme of the global economy. And it's not like global oil, petroleum that we all rely on for so many things. That's a much stickier, trickier subject. I mean, we don't need to have so many heads of cattle here. You can do it there. You can do it more efficiently. You can have a little less cattle. It can be a little more expensive. That's not going to be a huge problem for the world. They just don't want to.
And I think that another thing, we are not talking because we don't know until today the impact in the oceans. For example, we have the big river in Amazon River is one of the biggest in the world. And this river carrying a lot of nutrients to the Atlantic Ocean. And if we don't have the rain season, what is happening with the oceans? And the ocean is interconnected. It's a system. We live in a life system. We are interlinked, we are interdependent. So we don't know what will happen, actually.
There's so much we don't know. Okay, let's stay for a moment then on profits and who's profiting, because among the people who are deriving benefit from the Amazon right now are the very poor people who live there and are farming perhaps on prescribed land, who may be fishing on indigenous territory. People who are there have also been there for generations, and their livelihoods are based on doing some of these economic activities that we see as harmful to the ecosystem. And I know that this is something that Dom thought a great deal about, and you spoke about just now when you said that he would talk to everyone. What can be done for for people whose livelihoods have come to depend on activities that are problematic for the environment?
I think, the answer is not easy, because I think many people think about Amazon as a block of forest with huge rivers. It's not. It's a home to 29 million people. It's a lot of people. And they are facing social issues. They are facing a few job opportunities, you know. So if we don't have one good development, economic development, because now we have an aggressive economic development in Amazon. Mm-hmm. So we have farmers or big companies exploring. So don't say to I think to you, and he also say to me, who am I to judge these fathers of families that work in gold mining while I'm living in my home, I have my job, I have my salary, you know what I mean? So I think that don't talk about the international support, but I think that we have to know more about the supply chain. The supply chain have to be very transparent to citizens choose what we can consume, but actually it's not just an individual choice. We have to join together really in a collective way to make pressure in the politicians, in big companies, you know what I mean? Because more and more we know we have access to good information, more I think that we can take good decisions. And you can explain this better because my English not enough to say this.
Your English is fantastic. Don't.
But actually, we have these companies, many big transnational companies, just having profits, and we as consumers, we don't know. We have the right to know this and
Right.
choice if we will consume or not.
Right. Let's stay on that for a moment longer, Andrew. So we know that large multinational companies are reaping profits from this, but the actual people in the forest, the people who are doing the farming, the people, even the illegal gold miners you mentioned, they aren't getting rich. They are living close to a subsistence life. How much are they a part of the solution for wherever the Amazon needs to go?
Oh, they're a huge part. And you know, the cruelest irony of all this is that the people who murdered Dom and Bruno were very much in this vision that he's talking about, of these people that, you know, in a lot of these communities, there's not a lot of options, and maybe there is a, you know, investors or a criminal gang that's coming in and they're offering, you know, fancy powerboat and the best opportunity for you to take care of your kids, and you haven't had, you know, the state hasn't reached your community very well. You don't have a lot of options, and so what needs to change is that they need to have alternatives. And these are all political choices. I mean, the amount of subsidies that goes to big agro and to cattle in Brazil, we don't know the full number because the government doesn't do that research because they don't really want to do that research. They get tens of billions of dollars a year. We know that. Between tax breaks and incentives and all the different services they provide, globally for big agro, we're talking about trillions of dollars with oil and gas as well. All this money is going to subsidize these industries that are killing us. And one of the people that I speak to in my chapter about international finance and financing is a woman who's an activist for the Landless Peasants Movement, MST. It's the biggest peasant movement in the world. It's an incredible organization. And there's law in Brazil that if you have unproductive land, then the government has to give that land over to peasants so that they can, you know, use this and have a sustainable lifestyle. So she and her community came in, they settled this farm, and they were using it for cattle. And so because it's not their land and they're not sure if they're going to get title and how long this is going to take, it's going to take 9 years for them to get title. They just kept doing the cheapest thing possible, which is raising more cattle. This is the big leftist organization that's communist organization. And they're doing it because it makes complete economic sense. They don't have the resources to do it. Why are they going to invest the money they don't have, to buy the equipment that they don't have, to retool the land to become an agroforest, which is a more sustainable model that as everything's in balance and use multiple different crops overlay. It's not monocropping. And so she was saying that they were all doing this because this is a thing that was provided. They don't have, the government's not really coming to help them. The NGOs aren't coming to reach them. And then now they're seeing that the cattle is becoming unsustainable for them. Like even if they wanted to, which they never wanted to, which is what the thing that was made the most economic sense, with the new heat waves and the dry seasons that are becoming longer and longer, it's actually not profitable for them in a way that it never really was, massively profitable. But they want to have agroforestry, which is one of the best ways to have sustainable economic systems for local people that also regenerates the Amazon and prevents this massive collapse that we just talked about. And they're desperate to get this money, to get a little bit of help, which is it's so little money. There's a study that I cite in my chapter that said that over 20 years to have the transition to a sustainable Amazon economy, it's $500 billion. It sounds like a lot of money, but you know how many trillions of dollars there are in the economy? Do you know, this is like 0.5% or 0.2%, I don't remember, of the GDP of Brazil per year. It's so much less than is going to the subsidies for mining and oil and for big agro and for these major landholders that are not paying any of their fines. So it's really it's not, in some ways it's not hard at all what the answer is, and in other ways it's incredibly complex and impossible because it's politics. So it really depends on the lens that you're using to look at the situation. But there are millions of people in the Amazon that are ready to participate in the solution if you can work with them to help.
Thank you. The Amazon from time to time enters the international news cycle. In 2019, which was the first fire season under Jair Bolsonaro, there was a surge in the number of fires in the Amazon, and for it feels like a week or two, that was a subject that we were seeing here in the United States and was getting attention in Europe. In 2022, with the disappearance of Dom and Bruno, again, there was global attention on the rainforest and a sense of urgency behind coming up with solutions for its challenges. And then inevitably, the discussion recedes, at least from the global public discussion. Obviously, there are people who focus on these issues full time. But it can create for many of us this black box in which we don't really know what's going on there right now. We've had a change of president in Brazil and in the United States. What is happening on the ground right now in the Amazon?
Well, now we have the consequence of the farmers' president. So, Bolsonaro encouraged with his speech some irresponsible criminal activities. So, we are facing this now in Amazon.
Still.
Yeah. Yeah, because and when he destroy the government agents to órgãos de proteção?
Protection Agency, for the Environmental Protection Agency?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you have to rebuild this structure. It takes time. They hired a lot of good employers, so you have to rebuild this. It's not easy. And I think that in meantime, in the Bolsonaro's government, we had this. We had problems in Amazon, but they potentially with narco traffic now, because you have combined narco traffic with illegal activities.
Mm-hmm.
So it's much more complex to solve this. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And we have now in Brazil we have a horrible Congress. And this Congress, it's leading by agribusiness, the worst of agribusiness mentality, because it's actually the problem in Amazon is affecting right now the production. It's so stupid because they are changing the rain season. The production is just decreasing because of no water. We have dry season in many parts of Brazil. And I think that now we have this consequence of Bolsonaro's government, but we have the problem, current problem with the Congress.
So what I'm hearing is if you have a government come in and disrupt the institutions of government, that's going to have a lasting effect and it will be difficult to rebuild.
Yeah.
It sounds not very different from what might be happening in this country.
Yeah.
Okay, the president for the last 2+ years has been Lula, who ran on, in part, on promises to slow deforestation, improve conditions in the Amazon. Either one of you, how effective has he tried to keep these promises, and what if anything are we seeing now?
Well, I think that now is better, no doubt, because under Bolsonaro it's a nightmare. But as I say, we have this agribusiness Congress is horrible. Just battle, how can I say, struggling with environmental laws, trying to soften them. It's horrible right now. Mm-hmm. There is indigenous demarcation. They want to explore gold mining in indigenous land. So I think that now it's really important, the international pressure to try to support especially indigenous and traditional communities to keep safe their lands. But we are living a big challenge moment.
Yeah, I mean, trying to make this in U.S. terms, it's like Lula's government. He won the election, okay, much better than Bolsonaro. He's not openly saying let's chop it all down, and then like 2/3 of his government of the Congress is all Joe Manchins, right? Like, we're on your side, we're your ally, we may be in your party or in your coalition, but also, drill baby drill, chop it all down, and it's gotten worse and worse over the years, and at the same time, he's been going further and further to the right, maybe because of his own convictions, maybe because of his pragmatic, politics, but right now, there is a bill that passed in the House, passed in the Senate, is now going back to the House, which is being called like the devastation bill. And it is completely stripping the need for environmental approval processes for major mining, dams, large farms. It's all gonna be self-reported. Check some boxes, I swear I'll be good, and that's fine. This is like catastrophic if this were to happen, which is why it's being called what it's being called. And his government is not opposing it at all, which the Bolsonaro government would not be opposing either. They'd be supporting it, he's just not opposing it. Like, why? Is it because he believes in this? I don't think so. I think he just knows that he's not gonna win, but you can't just give up the fight, right? And so this is just one example. And in my chapter in the book, I went to COP28 in Dubai, and it's this moment of great hope, right? Like, it's been spent 4 years battling against the Bolsonaros, and like people were getting killed and terrible things were happening every single week, and you're just constantly in this defensive mode. Now you have this opportunity, all these promises he made in the campaign. He had Haoni, the famous indigenous leader, up on the stage with him during his inauguration. They're just, okay, like this is it. And he has this meeting with 120 representatives of civil society that are all there, excited, this is it. And we just got COP coming to Brazil, and so it's gonna be, this big opportunity for a pivot, this inflection point in global history, in human history. And he goes up there on the stage and he says, I want to let you all know that we are not going to join OPEC, as has been reported in the press. And I was like, oh my God, like he's going to step back from this. Like, this is great. They're giving up oil like Gustavo Petro did in Colombia. He said, because we're joining OPEC Plus, and it's going to be great. We're going to make the change from the inside. And you just feel, the oxygen leave the room, and it's just this moment that really crystallized this juxtaposition of the hope and the electoral promises, and then the reality of the political scenario in which we live in. So that's why I think Dom understood this. I mean, this was after he died, so he didn't see this exact situation happening, but he understood that the thing that most scared the Bolsonaros and the agribusiness and all the people that want to do the devastation law is the threat of an international boycott. Under Bolsonaro, there was a serious threat that Europe was going to boycott Brazilian beef, and this was going to be in soy. And this was going to be a huge economic hit for them. They're being driven by their bottom line, and that was the thing that was forcing them to make certain changes in accommodations and concessions. So Lula does not have the power, even if he wanted to. And he just said recently that he's so proud of JBS, for being the biggest meat producer in the world. They're the ones that are most responsible of all the recent violations of deforestation. I think they're like responsible for 92% was in their supply chain. They're just completely responsible for so much of this. And he's very proud of them. It was under his government that pushed up. So we need international government regulations, laws, pressure, consumer actions to make it so that this is no longer a profitable decision for them to make. And that's really the thing that's going to most be able to change this, because the Brazilian Congress ain't gonna do it.
Okay, I want to ask the audience if you all have questions. Before that, can you take us through just quickly how this book came to be? It was a book that Dom was reporting and writing when he was killed, and he was killed in the process of reporting it. And so he had some material left, but it needed to be finished. Can you talk about how we got from the material that Dom left to this book that we have today?
Wow, it's an amazing journey, because for me, this book, being left unfinished, it was unacceptable. They tried to silent book Don and Bruno. And I really appreciate this book team with amazing names of journalists, and they made this effort to finish the book because they have the same sensation. It's unacceptable. Just leave this book unfinished. And it's important to say that no one gained any money. They work with a collective, amazing team to finish this. We had the introduction that Don made the introduction, and the first 4 chapters.
The first 4 chapters.
First, yeah. And we have materials to finish, but not in any chapter. We have more information for one chapter and less for others. And they have amazing work traveling to the same place that Don made, making the same, interviewing the same people. So I think that was absolutely fantastic. And I really think that this book is a practical example that Don wrote in the introduction. It's only the collective and community thinking can save the Amazon. So they made this in an amazing way. And I think that Andrew can give you all the details, because he was the responsible to just understand the Don's letter, horrible letter, and in his notebook, and just to discover the passwords of many files. So
Yeah, so the book opens in the introduction with Dom in the Javari Valley, which is the place that he was killed. It opens with this trip with him with Bruno Pereira, and this was the last trip of this book project. So when he was shot, he was 30 minutes away from town, and then he was going to get on another boat to go to another town, and then he's going to get on an airplane, go to Manaus, the big giant megalopolis in the middle of the Amazon that's just freakish. You should look it up. It's just like the wildest city. And then go to back home, Quesale, sit in his office, for 3 months and just finish this book, which is just like, so much makes it more tragic and sadder. And so he had so much work done. It was so organized. It was so well structured. He's an incredibly organized guy, much better at organization than cryptography, thankfully. It made it much easier to get all of his files. And so he had all these dozens and dozens of interviews, and each of them was connected to each chapter, and he had outlines for each one. But as the chapters went on, the files started getting smaller and smaller and smaller. So by the time we got to the one that I did, which is one of the last ones, he had like 5 links. One of them was an article I wrote, and he had told me, like, I have no fucking idea what I'm going to do for this chapter, which was a lot easier for me because it gave me more freedom of motion. But for the ones that were like right after the ones that he stopped, I made you cry, I'm so sorry, that he had much more working on. It was really difficult as an author to think about, how am I going to do this chapter? Like, am I going to try to do like ghost whispering and channel Dom and what he would have done, which is going to be terrible. Like, you're never going to be able to do as well as he could. It's just going to be bizarre. And so we realized that everybody had to do their own chapter with their voice, but we chose authors that knew him, that cared for him, and were very dedicated to honoring his vision. Because there's lots of specialists and experts who have very different opinions about what the future needs, what the solutions are. And if you just get experts that have no connection to the man who's responsible for this book, then it's just going to be a free-for-all. So I think everybody did a very good job of trying to stay as true as they could to Dom, to his vision, to the notes that he left. And one of the things that we were very set on very early is that we needed to raise the money, and we did a crowdfunding. We had 400 people that donated to this. We got some other grants. That every chapter that wasn't finished, we needed to have the people go out in the field, because he was so adamant about the fact that you can't, like, the best reporting is not done by telephone. You have to be there. You have to see what they're seeing. You have to see what they're not telling you. You have to, get those little pieces of context that are the key to making people care the way that he cared, right? And so we sent reporters out, and that's why this book took 3 years from when he was killed to when it was published. We sent people, we had decided one author for each chapter, send them to the places that he went or that he would have wanted to go, and try to retrace some of the steps, find new steps, because the dynamics, the political dynamics had changed. He was doing this under the Bolsonaro administration, we were doing it under Lula. And just try to make the best book possible. And lastly, there were so many people that wanted to participate, and that were completely qualified to do incredible work, but there's only so many chapters. So we felt that it was important that we, since this book is about people power and this collective action that's necessary, we wanted to, and that making sure that his voice wasn't silenced, we thought it was important to have as many people as possible contributing. So there's 36 contributors to the book that did editing, that did revision, that gave photos, that helped with logistics, that wrote. So it's this massive project of so many people that really cared for Dom, and that really believed in his vision. So just it still hasn't really set in, like that it actually exists, right? You know, like you see it here over here, but it still doesn't feel real because it's been such a long and painful process. So thank you all for coming and supporting the book and the vision.
And I just want to add one thing, because I'm very emotional. I'm a Latin American woman, so I'm crying all the time and talking about emotions. And I think that they had this careful to follow the Don's idea, the Don's appointment. He's absolutely guiding this book. But all of them had their own style to write. And I think this is so beautiful, because you have Don's idea, but in many different ways. And I think, well, Don probably will not write this, but this is fantastic, because it's the Don's mind to with the collaborative work. Mm-hmm. So I think this book, my God, this book is absolutely fantastic.
It is remarkable.
Yes.
Now, if there are people who have questions, we have one mic.
Just briefly, is there any movement about consumer responsibility and animal rights groups that are reacting to any of this, as far as the people taking responsibility for consuming cattle, for example, or say anything about that?
Sure. So the question of consumer responsibility is incredibly important. So we know that British Petroleum in the 80s and 90s created this campaign of recycling to try to remove the responsibility from the oil companies that were, producing and creating oil and doing all the political lobbying to make sure that they could keep making as much profit as possible, to talk about recycling. So it's all of our faults. So I have the same responsibility as BP and Exxon does. And obviously that isn't true, but it was incredibly effective. But it is also true that, if you're eating beef from the Amazon, you're contributing to the problem. But the fact is that we shouldn't have to read the label of every single product and have to, do intense research to just live, to eat food. Because we need legislation and regulation and corporate responsibility so that you don't have to make this choice. I mean, choosing whether or not to eat meat is a different question, which completely legitimate as well. But if you are going to eat beef, you should not have an option on the shelf that is deforestation and slave labor, but not labeled that way. And then right next to it, there's another one like, oh, I don't know which one's fresher, which one's. I say, oh, I have to do a dissertation to figure out. That's ridiculous, and that is something that if we only focus on consumer choice, then it's letting those major actors that are responsible for this off the hook. We live in a society where that's not the situation currently. So it is important that people care about this and make these choices. And if you want to make the choices for yourself and it makes you feel better and you're doing, it is a better thing to do. But it's important that you take that and we expand this so that you're using these choices as a point of leverage and of conversation so that we're working together to create coalitions to demand this accountability on a larger scale than just each individual choice, because one by one, it's not going to happen, right? Like not everybody's coming to Rizzoli on a Monday evening to learn about the Amazon. It just, and you shouldn't have to, and that's the point that I think is really important. But it's a very good question, and it's something that needs to be talked about more.
Thanks. The title of the book suggests optimism and suggests possibility. Other than the two of you, where are the leaders, the corporate leaders, the political leaders, the leaders of nations who are sharing in this optimism and guiding a large group of people towards the, well, I have to say miracle that could happen if we turn this around?
I think that we need real commitment, and we are the citizen can put pressure in our governments, because they are talking a lot. For example, COP30 will happen in Brazil. We will have all the decisions made before in German. So we will be just a theater, a kind of actors just signing deals. It's ridiculous, you know. So I think that our power is to put pressure in these governments and understand when we are voting, we have to know more about the environmental agenda of our candidates.
Is anyone setting the example though right now? Is there anybody, as I say, a corporation, the opposite of BP, or a country that's leading in this?
There are so many wonderful examples in the book that if you were to buy it, I would. No, I'm kidding. No, there are examples, and you're absolutely right that the title is optimistic. And the original subtitle, Dom's subtitle, was "Ask Those Who Know," because there are so many people that he has met in his 10 years of doing reporting for this book that are leaders that aren't always getting international recognition or don't even speak English or foreign languages, aren't traveling around, but are doing incredible things and setting examples that are being followed. Local leaders, regional. There's some politicians that are providing some hope, but also with the reality that they're dealing with. And one of the things that I write about in my chapter is some of the legislation that's happening through the EU, where they're creating laws that are requiring that all products coming from the Amazon have tracing set by their standards, not voluntary standards that JBS decides that they're willing to do because it's actually easy to get around. Like very rigid standards. And if you are caught violating them, then you are liable for a percentage of all of the sales that your company makes in the EU as a whole. So for soy, this is a big thing for these massive soy traders. And this is the sort of legislation that could actually make a big change, because the market is so big that if you're going to go through all this just for the EU, then you might as well do it for most of the rest of your markets, right? And then it makes it easier for other nations to go through. The problem, of course, is money, politics, loopholes. And that's what they're battling with now. But it is a very promising and hopeful idea. And there's another idea that, considering everything that I just talked about, the Lula government, maybe not very likely to happen, but is so elegant and beautiful that Marina Silva, who's this legendary environmentalist, and she's the environmental minister right now for the Lula government. She was a minister in the first Lula government and created 80% reduction in deforestation in just a few years, which shows, like, one of the reasons why I think Dom wanted to do this book. It's like, if she could do that in that little amount of time, with everything being as messed up as it is, then that's a sign that it is really possible to make massive change without completely dismantling capitalism. You don't have to have this amazing. So she has this wonderful idea, which is the Global Forest Forever Fund, and you get major sovereign wealth funds to get these bonds that are the highest level of as if it were a government bond, and they will pay everyone who has tropical forests, who owns land in tropical forests, a certain amount of money per acre, per hectare, if they keep it pristine and intact. And then for every hectare that they deforest, it's a 100x penalty. And if it were to go through at the amounts of money that they were talking about and at the rates that they were talking about paying, it would pay more money to keep your fund money going and getting that every year than it would to do the average cattle ranching in your land. It's not a lot of money. And the amount of money they need to raise to get the rates, the math checks out. I don't remember the number off the top of my head right now, but it was again something like $400 billion in investments. It's not donations, right? It's just You're already making investments. You're getting market rate returns. It's so simple. It's so elegant. There's none of this bureaucracy that you have to qualify. And these ideas are out there, but there are people that don't want them to exist, and they fight to make sure that they don't get the attention that they deserve, because they'd rather keep the subsidies going and keep the status quo going, because they're afraid of change and losing a little bit of their billions and billions in wealth.
So we have time for one or two more questions. I'll go back here and then over there. Okay, we can do them fast if we can.
I'll try to be very quick. Ali, thank you so much for being here. So thank you for gathering efforts for this book. I work for an international human rights organization, and I'm a testimony how Dom was a generous journalist, even not only about the Amazon. I used to work on police violence in Rio de Janeiro, and he was super generous and super present in the lives of human rights organizations. So he was a real human rights defender. So first of all, I wanted to take the opportunity to say that, because he was an amazing, generous person. And my question is, so in the case of Don and Bruno, because of the international repercussion and the gravity of the issue, the perpetrators were brought to justice, right? You still see that Brazil and public prosecutors are being able to fight impunity, which is not the case for most of people who are killed or threatened because of crimes related to the environment. So this is one case among several others. Do you believe that this book, or what happened to Don and Bruno, unfortunately, have given light to the violence against people in the Amazon? Because I think Dom would say, to save the Amazon, you need to save people who are there every day, putting their lives, as you said in the beginning. So do you believe that the book could play this role, and do you think things have changed because of what happened to them?
I think not changed until today, but had to change. So I have to keep this belief to go ahead. You know what I mean? Because it's unacceptable. Who is living the front line, being threatened and being murdered, protecting one rainforest that all of us have the privilege to live here in Brazil or here, taking advantage about this protection. You know what I mean? Eliane Brum say one thing that I think, Eliane Brum is one of the journalists, writers, this book, and she said for me, Ali, when I was living in São Paulo, is a big Brazilian city, she said, I'm writing about Amazon, and I had no problem because I'm living in São Paulo. Now that I'm living in Amazon, I'm facing many times criminals in the supermarket. And I'm threatened. I'm under threat. I can go outside of my house at night. And I'm a white person. I'm a very now Brazilian journalist. I have many meetings around the world, and I'm under threat. So I can't imagine who is poor, living, trying to protect their way of life. So it's really unfair. And including in Don and Bruno's case, I don't know if it would be fair. My lawyers say to me, Ale, don't put a lot of expectation on this trial. You know, because if they be convicted,
If they get convicted, yeah.
yeah,
Which they have not been yet.
maybe they can spend less than 10 years in the jail. And the problem is not about the justice, it's because they are returned to the cities and maybe then can keep working in this criminal activities. So it's really complex situation, but there is no option. Give up is not an option.
there's 3 people that were directly responsible for it, that they've been indicted. 2 of them are in prison waiting trial. One of them is on house arrest. And there's all the people that helped hide the bodies. They're also been indicted. And just on the 5th, which was the anniversary of their death, the person who's their boss was just indicted. But they haven't been brought to justice, right? Like it's still pending. Brazilian courts, very slippery. It could take, maybe they'll get less than 10 years, but it could take more than 10 years for them to actually get a final sentence, you know? And there's so many ways to avoid responsibility. And there's just, and this is a very, very well-known international recognition case, but being a land defender or being a journalist in Brazil is one of the most dangerous places in the world. Colombia, Mexico. I mean, obviously, being a journalist right now, Gaza is far and away the most dangerous. But I had this conversation with Dom that I said to him, you know, you're this blue-eyed gringo, you're showing up in the middle of the Amazon. The people will know that you're just more trouble than it's worth to mess with you. No one wants to bring that heat. So I think that the people who are living there out in the field, these working for local outlets, they're the ones that are really facing the biggest threat, and we shouldn't be grandstanding and saying, oh, our lives are so hard. I live in Rio. I'm not the one that's out there doing that as much. I run a newsroom, and he said, no, man, you're wrong, because when you're out in the middle of the Amazon, you have some legal gang people that maybe aren't even literate. They don't know what the Washington Post or the Guardian is. They've never read it. They've never even heard of it. And they don't know who I am. They just know that I'm a guy there that's in their way for the thing that they need to get done. Unfortunately, Dom was right and I was wrong.
Okay, I'm sorry to cut it short. We have time for one more. So if there's someone with a burning question, you want to?
Hi, I'm a journalist, and I was lucky enough to go to the Amazon to write about they were going to be the part of it that was World Heritage Site, and in those days when they were just starting it, I went in the wet season or in the dry season, and it was very wet. I mean, it was just amazing, and there were very few people there, except for the people who actually had lived there. I'm sort of wondering how did that change happen so quickly over a couple of decades, 1. And then 2, we're here in the United States, and we have a sort of Bolsonaro-esque president right now. What would you suggest that we do as Americans to try to help rectify the situation? Because it's disastrous for you all, but also for the rest of the world.
O primeiro é como assim que ficou tão rápido, que teve essa queda na seca, foi tão dramático em tão pouco tempo. O segundo, como a gente pode lidar com essa situação com o presidente Trump, como a gente consegue ajudar e retificar a situação. Big questions. I'll start on the first one, and on the second one, and then you can answer the first one. On the second one, I will point you to things that have happened recently in the US. What has the stock price drop in sales been in Tesla? What has happened for Target versus Costco? I mean, those are consumer choices but done on a mass scale, people coming together, and they're saying that, we don't stand for this, the thing that you're doing. And it's forced them to change their behavior because it's affecting their bottom line. I quote one of the first ESG investment guys for BlackRock in my chapter, and he said ESG, environmental social governance. So it's like the responsible corporate behavior, except it's really just making sure that your future profits aren't affected by your decisions now. It's not actually for saving the world, right? And he said, it's all a bunch of bullshit. Those are the exact words he used. I'm not editorializing. And that the only way that you're going to make this stuff change is if you affect the bottom line. This is how the financial world operates. They only are moved by incentives. And so you need to make it so that you need to hurt their bank account, their wallet, to make them change. So, Bolsonaro was in president, you're not going to get stuff going through the executive. With Trump's SEC just approved an initial public offering to list JBS on the US stock exchange, which they've been fighting against for years because of corruption and fraud and all of the environmental stuff, and they were lying about their promises. But Trump just wrote it through. So the way that we can do that in these times when we don't have certain levers of power is realize that we have other levers of power, and that we can't just wait on institutions to solve our problems for us. Once people start working together, all of a sudden the Target's CEO got really scared, right? He realized how powerful.
Famous boycott.
Yeah, boycott. There were cases during the Bolsonaro years where British consumers were boycotting their supermarkets so that they would not carry Brazilian beef. And that was a way that they were able to put the pressure, like, we will not take any Brazilian beef or soy or whatever product until there is, uniform rules that these companies are following the proper behaviors. And it did create this pressure that got them very scared and did get them talking and to the negotiating table. So I think you can start there for beef. Yeah. And beef is 80 to 90% of the deforestation is beef.
Any last comments from you guys?
The other part of the question was, I think if I understand the question, it was how did the conditions in the Amazon change so quickly? Right. You visited when? So last 30 years. Are you aware of a change in the Amazon over the last 30 years?
Well, I'm just into this subject after Don's death because I knew Amazon through the Don's eye. So I'm learning a lot. As you, I have a lot of questions. And I think it's my role and our role to assess good information, to know more and more. But as I know recent now, that we had a lot of support of government and this vintage idea of development to make progress to the region. So we have a lot of incentives.
Yeah,
Incentives to
Subsidies.
people go to Amazon to explore big farmers and gold miners and yeah. Can you remember
This has been going on since the
slogan
60s.
of the dictatorship?
What? Well, so your question was, how did it happen so fast? This change from the dry season being wet to the dry season actually being dry. If you look at photos from the last dry season, the rivers are just a trickle, which is just never used to happen. And the thing is, the scientists are asking the same question because they're shocked too. Nobody expected it to be something that was so dramatic, and this is just one perfect example of why you shouldn't mess with this stuff, because nature is smarter than us. It's much more complex than people want to realize. It's not just one input in, one output out. And so, which is why when you're constantly destabilizing on all these different levels and these different angles, and the ice caps in the Andes are shrinking, and that's the source of the Amazon's water as well. You start creating these multiplier effects that you don't know exactly how it's going to happen. So, the projections for how quick this could collapse or how terrible climate change can be, we're constantly getting new data that's scientists saying actually it's going to be worse, faster. And so that's why it's so important to not, play with fire, literally.
Alessandro, Andrew, and Matt, thank you for being here tonight. Let's give them a round of applause. So we're going to sign books now, and just to let you know where to buy the book, they're all at the front of the store. The register's up there, so head up there first to buy your copy, bring it back, and they'll sign it for you. And thanks again for coming, everyone, and thanks to our speakers. Have a great night.
Thank you.
Thanks.